The billionaire's son was born completely blind, and doctors couldn't explain why, until a poor 5-year-old black girl discovered a shocking secret hidden for years that would change both their lives forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The Harrison mansion stood like a monument to success on the hills of Connecticut, its white columns gleaming under the afternoon sun. But inside the master bedroom on the 3rd floor, 6-year-old Ethan Harrison sat in darkness. A darkness that had been his only reality since the day he was born. William Harrison III stood at the doorway, his tailored suit feeling heavier than usual as he watched his son. At 34, William had built a technology empire worth billions, solved problems that brilliant minds said were impossible, closed deals that others called unthinkable, yet he couldn't fix the one thing that mattered most. "Ethan," William's voice cracked slightly, "want to come downstairs for lunch?" The small boy turned his head toward his father's voice with eerie precision. "Is it lunchtime already, Dad?" His little hands felt the bedspread beneath him. "I was counting. I got to 427. William's heart twisted. His son was counting seconds to mark time, to make sense of a world he couldn't see. "Yes, buddy. Mrs. Thompson made your favorite, grilled cheese." Ethan's face brightened slightly, but he didn't move. He never moved unless guided. The doctors said there was no physical reason for his blindness. His eyes were structurally perfect. The optic nerves appeared intact. But somehow, impossibly, Ethan Harrison lived in complete and total darkness. 23 specialists across 3 countries had examined him. 23 times, William had heard the same baffling words. "We don't understand it." Downstairs, Sarah Thompson was placing fresh flowers in the foyer vase when the doorbell chimed. She smiled, knowing who it was. "Come on in, sweetie," she called. The door burst open, and 5-year-old Grace Thompson bounded inside, her braided hair bouncing with each step. "Mama, Mama, I saw a butterfly." It was orange and black, and it landed right on my hand. Sarah gathered her daughter into her arms, breathing in the scent of sunshine and innocence. "That's wonderful, baby." She'd been working as the Harrison family's cook for 3 years now, ever since Grace's father had passed. The job had been a blessing, good pay, flexible hours that let her be with Grace after school, and the Harrisons, despite their wealth, had always treated her with respect. "Mrs. Thompson." William's voice echoed from the stairwell. "Would it be all right if Grace came upstairs for a bit?" I thought. "Maybe Ethan could use some company his own age." Sarah's heart swelled. She'd been hoping for this. "Of course, Mr. Harrison. Grace, would you like to meet Ethan?" Grace's eyes went wide. "The boy who lives upstairs? The one who's always quiet?" "Yes, honey. But remember, Ethan can't see, so you'll need to tell him everything you're doing." Grace nodded solemnly, taking it in with the seriousness only a 5-year-old could muster. She followed William up the curved staircase, her small hand trailing along the polished banister. When they entered Ethan's room, Grace stopped dead. The room was beautiful, decorated with space-themed wallpaper, planets and stars that Ethan had never seen. Toy spaceships sat untouched on shelves, and there, on the edge of his bed, sat the loneliest boy Grace had ever encountered. "Ethan," William said gently, "this is Grace. She's Mrs. Thompson's daughter. She wanted to meet you." Grace walked closer, her footsteps soft on the carpet. "Hi, Ethan. I'm Grace. I'm 5 years old and I like butterflies." Ethan's head tilted, processing this new voice. "Hi, I'm 6. I like counting." There was an awkward pause. William started to intervene, but Grace spoke first. "Why don't you open your eyes, Ethan?" William froze. "Grace, sweetie, Ethan can't." "They are open, Grace." The words hung in the air like ice. Grace stared at Ethan's face, at his wide, unblinking eyes that stared at nothing, at eyes that were, indeed, already open, and for the first time in 6 years, someone was about to ask the question that would unravel everything. But if they're already open, then why can't you see? William excused himself, leaving the 2 children alone. As his footsteps faded down the hallway, Grace pulled up a chair and sat directly in front of Ethan. "Can I ask you something?" Grace's voice was gentle but curious. "Okay. When you wake up in the morning, what do you see?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. Like, is it black? Is it grey? Is it like closing your eyes really tight?" No one had ever asked Ethan this before. Doctors asked about pain, about headaches, about whether he could sense light, but no one had asked what he actually experienced. I don't know what black is, Grace. I don't know what any color is. I just don't see anything." Grace pondered this, her small face serious. "That must be really scary." "It's just how I am," Ethan said quietly. "I've never seen anything else." Over the next hour, Grace did something remarkable. She started describing everything around them. Not just what things looked like, but how they felt, how they sounded, what they reminded her of. She took Ethan's hand and guided it over the spaceship models, telling him stories about each one, as if she'd flown them herself. "This one has 3 engines," she said, placing his fingers on the toy. "It would sound like whoosh when it takes off. Feel those little windows? That's where the astronauts look out and see all the stars." For the first time in years, Ethan laughed, really laughed. The sound startled Sarah, who was working in the kitchen below. She looked up at the ceiling, tears forming in her eyes. That was the sound of her daughter giving another child a gift no doctor could provide: connection. When Grace finally left that evening, Ethan sat quietly in his room. But something was different. For 6 years, he'd existed in silence, in stillness, in careful, measured movements. Now, his fingers traced the spaceships Grace had described, and in his mind, he tried to imagine what stars might be. Downstairs, William found Sarah in the kitchen. "Mrs. Thompson? Thank you. I haven't heard him laugh like that since, well, ever." Sarah smiled through her own tears. "Grace has a gift, Mr. Harrison. She sees people, really sees them. Not their problems, not their differences, just them. Would it be all right if Grace came back tomorrow?" "I think," Sarah said softly, "that would be the best thing for both of them." What neither adult realized was that Grace had already decided something herself. Lying in her small bed that night, she stared at the ceiling and whispered to the darkness, "I'm going to help him see. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out." William excused himself, leaving the 2 children alone. As his footsteps faded down the hallway, Grace pulled up a chair and sat directly in front of Ethan. "Can I ask you something?" Grace's voice was gentle but curious. "Okay. When you wake up in the morning, what do you see?" Ethan's brow furrowed. "I don't understand. Like, is it black? Is it grey? Is it like closing your eyes really tight?" No one had ever asked Ethan this before. Doctors asked about pain, about headaches, about whether he could sense light, but no one had asked what he actually experienced. I don't know what black is, Grace. I don't know what any color is. I just don't see anything." Grace pondered this, her small face serious. "That must be really scary." "It's just how I am," Ethan said quietly. "I've never seen anything else." Over the next hour, Grace did something remarkable. She started describing everything around them, not just what things looked like, but how they felt, how they sounded, what they reminded her of. She took Ethan's hand and guided it over the spaceship models, telling him stories about each one as if she'd flown them herself. "This one has 3 engines," she said, placing his fingers on the toy. "It would sound like whoosh when it takes off. Feel those little windows. That's where the astronauts look out and see all the stars. For the first time in years, Ethan laughed, really laughed. The sound startled Sarah, who was working in the kitchen below. She looked up at the ceiling, tears forming in her eyes. That was the sound of her daughter giving another child a gift no doctor could provide: connection. When Grace finally left that evening, Ethan sat quietly in his room. But something was different. For 6 years, he'd existed in silence, in stillness, in careful, measured movements. Now, his fingers traced the spaceships Grace had described, and in his mind, he tried to imagine what stars might be. Downstairs, William found Sarah in the kitchen. "Mrs. Thompson, thank you." I haven't heard him laugh like that since. Well, ever. Sarah smiled through her own tears. "Grace has a gift, Mr. Harrison. She sees people, really sees them. Not their problems, not their differences, just them. Would it be all right if Grace came back tomorrow?" "I think," Sarah said softly, "that would be the best thing for both of them." Ogoom, what neither adult realized was that Grace had already decided something herself. Lying in her small bed that night, she stared at the ceiling and whispered to the darkness, "I'm going to help him see. I don't know how, but I'm going to figure it out." Grace became a daily presence in Ethan's life. Every afternoon after Sarah finished her cooking duties, Grace would bound up the stairs with new stories, new descriptions, new ways of helping Ethan understand the world beyond his darkness. "Today, I'm going to tell you about colors," Grace announced one Wednesday, plopping down on Ethan's floor. "Grace, I can't see colors." "I know, but I can help you feel them." She took his hand. "Red is like when you're really warm, like when you drink hot cocoa and it makes your whole chest feel cozy. That's red." Ethan tilted his head, considering this. "Blue is like when you touch cold water from the fridge. It's smooth and calm, like when your dad reads to you at night in that quiet voice." "What about yellow?" Ethan asked, tentatively engaging with this strange new game. "Yellow!" Grace practically bounced. "Yellow is like laughing. It's bright and happy and makes you want to smile. It's like sunshine on your face when you go outside." "I don't go outside much," Ethan admitted quietly. Grace's voice changed, became determined. "Then we need to change that." The next day, with William's nervous permission, Grace led Ethan down the grand staircase for the first time in months. Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, her heart in her throat as Grace guided the boy with patient certainty. "Okay, Ethan, there's a step coming. Put your foot down. Perfect. Another one. Good. You're doing amazing." When they reached the bottom, Ethan was breathing hard, but his face was flushed with accomplishment. "I did it! You did it!" Grace cheered. "Now comes the best part. We're going outside." The garden behind the Harrison mansion was spectacular. Manicured lawns, flower beds bursting with color, a small fountain that tinkled musically in the center. Grace led Ethan onto the grass, and he stopped dead. "Grace, what is this?" "That's grass. It's soft and a little scratchy, and it's green, which is like peaceful, like when you're calm and everything feels okay." Ethan knelt down, running his hands through the grass, feeling each blade between his fingers. "It tickles." "It does," Grace laughed. Then she had an idea. "Stay here, don't move." She ran to the flower beds and carefully picked a rose, making sure to avoid the thorns. Racing back, she placed it in Ethan's hands. "Smell this." Ethan brought the flower to his nose and inhaled deeply. His eyes widened, those same unseeing eyes, but suddenly filled with wonder. "What is it?" "It's a rose. It's red. Remember, like hot cocoa. But it smells like everything beautiful in the world." From the kitchen window, William watched this scene unfold, his vision blurring with tears. His son, his isolated, careful, fearful son, was kneeling in the grass, smelling a rose, with a smile brighter than William had ever seen. That evening, after Grace went home, Ethan asked his father something he'd never asked before. "Dad, can we go outside again tomorrow?" William had to steady himself against the doorframe. "Yes, Ethan. Yes, we can go outside every day if you want." But as William tucked his son into bed that night, he couldn't shake a strange feeling. Something about the way Ethan had moved in the garden, the way he'd turned toward the fountain without being told it was there, the way he'd reached for the rose, as if he could sense its location. It was probably nothing, just a father's desperate hope, finding patterns where none existed, but still something had shifted today. Something had changed, and neither William nor Ethan knew that Grace was just getting started. 2 weeks passed, and Grace and Ethan became inseparable. The mansion that had once felt like a beautiful prison began to feel like a home. Laughter echoed through rooms that had known only quiet grief. Even the household staff noticed the change. William smiled more, worked from home more often, and spent hours watching his son discover the world through Grace's eyes. But Grace was noticing something strange. It started small. They were in the garden, and Grace had wandered a few feet away to catch a butterfly. "Ethan, don't move. There's a butterfly coming toward you." "Where?" Ethan had asked, and then, impossibly, he'd turned his head in the exact direction of the approaching insect. Grace had chalked it up to coincidence. Maybe he'd heard the flutter of wings. Then there was the incident with the ball. Grace had been bouncing a soft rubber ball in Ethan's room, describing the sound it made. The ball had rolled away across the carpet, making almost no sound. "Oops, lost it," Grace had said. "It's over there," Ethan had pointed, "by the toy box." He'd been exactly right. Again, Grace told herself it was luck. Maybe he'd heard something she hadn't. But today, in the kitchen, something happened that Grace couldn't explain away. Sarah was baking cookies, and Grace had brought Ethan downstairs for a snack. They were sitting at the kitchen counter when Sarah pulled a fresh batch from the oven and placed them on the cooling rack. "Mama, can we have one?" Grace asked. "Not yet, baby. They're too hot." Grace turned back to Ethan, chattering about her day at school. She was mid-sentence when Ethan suddenly reached out, not tentatively, not carefully, but with precision, and his hand stopped inches from the hot baking sheet. "Careful, Ethan," Sarah gasped, moving it away. But Grace had seen something that made her blood run cold. Ethan's hand hadn't been exploring randomly. He'd reached directly for the tray, as if he'd seen exactly where it was. "Ethan," Grace said slowly, "how did you know where the cookies were?" Ethan froze. His face went pale. I smelled them?" "No." Grace pressed gently. "The tray. You reached right for the tray, the metal tray that doesn't smell like anything." "I heard your mum put it down," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly. But Grace had been talking. The radio had been playing. The dishwasher was running. There was no way Ethan could have heard the soft sound of metal touching granite through all that noise. "Unless—" "Ethan," Grace whispered, "can you see—" "No." Ethan's response was immediate, almost panicked. "No, Grace, I can't see anything, I promise. It's all dark, just like always." Grace watched her friend's face. The way his eyes were moving, the way his hands were shaking, the way his voice had gone high and scared. He was telling the truth. Ethan genuinely couldn't see, but something else was happening, something nobody had noticed because they'd been too busy looking at his eyes. "Okay," Grace said softly, taking Ethan's hand. "I believe you." But that night, in her bed, Grace lay awake, thinking, how could someone reach for things they couldn't see? How could someone turn toward butterflies they couldn't hear? How could someone know exactly where objects were in space if they lived in complete darkness? The answer was impossible. But Grace had learned something important from her mama. Impossible things are only impossible until you figure out how they're possible. She just needed to figure out what Ethan was actually sensing, if it wasn't sight. and she had a feeling the answer would change everything. William Harrison's home office was lined with awards, patents, and photos documenting his rise from a working-class kid in Ohio to a tech billionaire. But tonight, none of that mattered. He was on a video call with Dr. Patricia Reeves, the 24th specialist, to examine his son. "Mr. Harrison, I've reviewed all of Ethan's records," Dr. Reeves said, her face pixelated on the screen. "And I have to be honest, I've never encountered anything like this. Neurologically, optically, everything checks out. By all medical standards, your son should be able to see." "Then why can't he?" William's voice cracked with 6 years of desperation. "I don't know. Sometimes, Mr. Harrison, we find conditions that medicine simply can't explain yet. I'm sorry I can't give you better answers." After the call ended, William sat in the darkness of his office, his head in his hands. He'd built a company on solving impossible problems, on seeing solutions others missed. Why couldn't he solve this? A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Harrison?" Sarah's voice came through the door. "Do you have a moment?" "Of course, Mrs. Thompson." "Come in." Sarah entered, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, I wanted to talk to you about something Grace said tonight." William straightened. "Is everything all right?" "She's been asking me questions about Ethan. Strange questions." Sarah sat down in the chair across from him. "She asked me if there are people who can sense things without using their eyes, like how bats use sound, or how some people can feel when someone's watching them." William's pulse quickened. "What brought this on?" "I think Grace has noticed something. The way Ethan moves when he's with her, the way he seems to know where things are." Sarah leaned forward. "Mr. Harrison, I'm not a doctor. I'm just a cook who raised a curious little girl. But Grace sees things adults miss, and she thinks there's something we're not understanding about Ethan's condition." "The doctor said—" "The doctors have been looking at his eyes," Sarah interrupted gently. "But what if the problem isn't in his eyes at all? What if something else is going on, something they haven't thought to test for?" William stared at her. In 6 years, 24 specialists, hundreds of appointments, no one had suggested they might be looking at this wrong. They'd all assumed, blind eyes, therefore nothing works. But what if? "Mrs. Thompson, would you and Grace join me for breakfast tomorrow? I'd like to hear more about what Grace has observed." Sarah smiled. "We'd be honored, Mr. Harrison." The next morning, Grace sat at the formal dining table, her legs swinging because they didn't reach the floor. She'd never eaten in this room before. It had crystal chandeliers and paintings that probably cost more than her mama's car. But Mr. Harrison had insisted. "Grace," William said gently, "your mom tells me you've noticed some interesting things about Ethan." Grace nodded seriously. "Mr. Harrison, can I ask you something? Has anyone ever tested if Ethan can sense things in other ways?" "What do you mean?" "Like, maybe his brain works different. Maybe he's not seeing with his eyes, but he's still getting information somehow." Grace's 5-year-old vocabulary struggled to capture what she was thinking. "Like echolocation. We learned about it in school. Dolphins and bats can see the world through sound." William felt like the floor had dropped away. Echolocation, spatial awareness through non-visual means. In 6 years, with all his resources, all the specialists, all the research, this possibility had never been explored. "Grace," William said, his voice thick with emotion, "you might be onto something incredibly important." That afternoon, William made calls to neurologists, to sensory specialists, to researchers who studied cases of extraordinary human perception. He described Ethan's unexplained spatial awareness, his ability to navigate better than a blind person should, the small moments that didn't quite add up. And one researcher, Dr. Marcus Chen at Johns Hopkins, said something that made William's world tilt. "Mr. Harrison, what you're describing sounds like it could be a form of synesthesia or sensory compensation we haven't documented. But there's another possibility, one that's rare but documented in medical literature. Sometimes, in cases of childhood trauma or extreme neurological events, the brain will suppress visual processing as a protective mechanism. The eyes work, the nerves work, but something in the brain refuses to process visual information. Why would that happen? Usually because the child saw something the brain couldn't handle. Something traumatic. The shutdown is a defense mechanism, an extreme one, but the brain's primary job is survival, even if its methods seem counterintuitive. William's blood ran cold. Are you saying my son chose not to see? Not consciously, but his brain might have made that choice for him. The question is, what did he see? That night, William sat in Ethan's room watching his son sleep. What had happened 6 years ago? Ethan had been born at home, in this very mansion during a spring storm. The delivery had been smooth, perfect even. The midwife, the doctor, everyone said it was textbook. Ethan had cried, had opened his eyes, had seemed completely healthy. Until 18 hours later, when they realized he wasn't tracking faces, wasn't responding to visual stimuli, wasn't seeing at all. What had happened in those 18 hours? What had a newborn baby seen that was so terrible, so overwhelming, that his brain shut down his vision entirely? And the terrifying question, was that thing still here, somewhere in this house? 3 days of rain had turned the Harrison estate's back lawn into a muddy wonderland. Grace pressed her nose against the kitchen window, watching the drops create ripples in the puddles. "Mama, can I go outside?" "Baby, it's muddy out there. You'll ruin your clothes." Please." Grace turned with her most winning smile. "I'll be careful," Sarah sighed, unable to resist. "Fine, but wear your old clothes." 20 minutes later, Grace was splashing in puddles, her laughter ringing through the afternoon air. She was making mud pies near the garden when she heard the patio door open. "Grace?" Ethan's voice called out uncertainly. "Ethan, you came outside by yourself. I heard you laughing. I wanted to come find you." Ethan stood on the stone patio, his hands outstretched slightly, orienting himself. "Come here. The mud is amazing. It's squishy and perfect for making things." "I'll get dirty." "That's the point," Grace called back. "Come on, I'll help you." Slowly, carefully, Ethan made his way down the patio steps and onto the grass. Grace met him halfway and took his hand, guiding him to her mud puddle workstation. "Okay, sit down right here. Perfect. Now put your hands in the mud." Ethan hesitated, then plunged his hands into the cool, wet earth. His face transformed. "It's cold." "And squishy," Grace added, demonstrating by squeezing mud between her fingers. "We can make anything. What do you want to make?" "I don't know what things look like, remember. Then make what things feel like. Make something that's you." "Map." For the next hour, the two children played in the mud with the unself-conscious joy that only children can achieve. They built towers and moats, created muddy masterpieces, laughed until their sides hurt. Sarah watched from the window, her heart full, already planning the bath and laundry that would follow. William came home early and found them there, two mud-covered children giggling in his previously pristine backyard. He should have been upset. Instead, he grabbed his phone and took pictures, capturing this moment of pure childhood happiness he'd thought his son would never experience. Grace was showing Ethan how to make handprints in the mud when it happened. She pressed his hand down into a particularly wet patch, and when she pulled it up, the suction made a soft popping sound. Ethan laughed, and then suddenly went still. "Grace," he whispered, "do that again." "Make another handprint?" "Yes, exactly like that." Grace pressed his hand down again, pulled it up. Pop. Ethan's breathing changed. His head tilted in that way it did when he was processing something important. "Grace, move away for a second." Confused, Grace stepped back. Ethan reached out, his muddy hand hovering over the puddle. Then, with impossible precision, he pressed his hand down exactly where Grace's hand had been moments before, leaving a perfect print right next to hers. "How did you do that?" Grace breathed. "Ethan, how did you know where my handprint was?" I don't know. I just knew." Ethan's voice was shaking. "Grace, I felt something. When the mud made that sound, when your hand came up, I felt where the space was, where the air moved, where things are." Grace's mind raced. This was it. This was what she'd been trying to figure out. "Ethan, what if you're not blind?" "But I am. I can't see anything." "No, listen." Grace grabbed his muddy hands. "What if your eyes don't work, but something else does? What if you're sensing things differently? Like when you touch something, you feel it, right?" "Right. What if you're feeling the world in a way that's not your eyes, but your brain thinks it's darkness because it's different from seeing?" They sat there in the mud, two children on the verge of understanding something the doctors had missed. Grace looked at her friend's face, at those eyes that saw nothing, at the mud smeared on his cheek, at the concentration furrowing his small brow. "Ethan," she said slowly, "I think something happened to you, something bad. And I think your brain protected you by turning off your eyes, but it didn't turn off everything. You're still sensing the world, you just don't know it's there. How do we turn it back on?" "I don't know," Grace admitted, "but I know someone who might. Someone who was there the day you stopped seeing." "Who?" Grace stood up, pulling Ethan with her. Mud dripped from their clothes as they ran toward the house. "Mama! Mama, we need to find the midwife! The one who helped deliver Ethan!" Sarah appeared at the door, her eyes widening at the mud-covered children. "Grace, what are you—" "Mama, please!" Grace was breathless. Something happened the day Ethan was born. Something he saw that made his brain shut down his vision. We need to find out what it was. William, who had been standing nearby, felt the world stop. Grace's words echoed in his mind, connecting with what Dr. Chen had said about protective brain mechanisms. His son hadn't been born blind. Something had happened. "Grace," William said, kneeling down to her level, his voice urgent, "what makes you think this?" "Because nobody is born knowing how to feel air move, Mr. Harrison. Nobody is born sensing space without seeing it. Ethan learned to survive in his darkness by finding other ways to perceive. His brain is working overtime to process the world without vision. But that means the mechanism could be reversed." William finished, his voice barely a whisper. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "The midwife. Margaret Kelly. She retired to Vermont. I have her address. I sent her Christmas cards." William stood up, his mind already racing. The midwife would remember. She'd been there for Ethan's entire first day. If something traumatic had occurred, something that caused an 18-hour-old infant to shut down his visual processing entirely. "Mrs. Thompson, could you get me that address?" William said. "I need to make some calls." As the adults rushed inside, Grace and Ethan remained in the garden, holding muddy hands. Grace looked at her friend and smiled. "We're going to figure this out, Ethan. We're going to find out what you saw." Ethan's unseeing eyes stared at nothing, but for the first time in 6 years, something like hope flickered across his face. What neither child knew was that the truth waiting to be uncovered was darker than anyone could have imagined. And it had been hiding in plain sight in the Harrison mansion for 6 years. The secret was about to emerge from its darkness. The black Mercedes cut through Vermont's morning fog as William gripped the steering wheel, Sarah beside him clutching Margaret Kelly's address. In the back, Grace and Ethan held hands, both understanding today might change everything. "Mrs. Thompson, what do you remember about Ethan's birth?" William asked urgently. Sarah closed her eyes, traveling back 6 years. Sunday morning, spring storm, Victoria wanted a home birth. Margaret came at dawn, and the delivery was perfect. Ethan came crying and healthy. When did we notice his eyes? Not right away. You were on a conference call. Tokyo emergency. I took care of Ethan that first night. Around midnight, feeding him in the nursery, I realized he wasn't tracking my face. His eyes were open but empty. Anything unusual happen? Sarah hesitated. The storm knocked out power for 20 minutes. I was in the dark nursery with Ethan when it happened. So quiet, just me and this baby in darkness, listening to thunder. In the back seat, Grace squeezed Ethan's hand tighter. Margaret Kelly's cottage appeared through the trees, smoke curling from the chimney. The elderly midwife opened the door, silver hair pulled back, face lined with decades of delivering babies. "William Harrison," she said, recognizing him immediately, "I wondered when you'd come." Those words hung like a confession. William's legs weakened. "You knew something was wrong? Come inside. This requires tea and truth." In Margaret's living room, surrounded by photos of babies she'd delivered, the old woman poured tea with shaking hands. "I've delivered 3,000 babies in 50 years. I've seen miracles and tragedies. But nothing like what happened to your son." "Tell me everything," William demanded. Margaret looked at Ethan, his unseeing eyes pointed vaguely toward her. The birth was beautiful. Ethan was perfect, and his eyes worked. I saw him looking at Victoria's face. He could see. William's world tilted. "Then what happened?" "Victoria was exhausted." "You were working." "Sarah took the baby while I finished up. I left around 10 p.m. Everything was fine." Margaret's voice dropped. "But I forgot my medical bag. I came back at midnight during the storm, let myself in quietly. And I heard crying from the nursery, adult crying, desperate, broken. I walked upstairs and saw Victoria standing there holding Ethan. Power was out, just candlelight. She was sobbing, rocking him, saying, 'I'm sorry, I can't let you see it, I can't let you know.' William stood so fast his chair tipped. Victoria would never hurt Ethan. Not physically, but something happened in that room. Something psychological. The way she held him, the things she said, like she was protecting him from something by making him not see." Margaret paused. Then the lights came back. She saw me. Her face went white. She handed me Ethan and said, "Something's wrong with his eyes." And she was right. Between when I'd left and returned, something broke. His eyes were still open, still moving, but there was nothing behind them, no recognition, no sight. Grace spoke up. "She made him blind, not with medicine, with her mind. Babies can sense their mother's emotions. If she was desperate enough, wanting him not to see something. A mother's psychological state can profoundly affect a newborn," Margaret confirmed, "but I've never seen it manifest as complete visual shutdown." William sank back. "What was Victoria protecting him from?" Margaret's eyes darkened. "That's what I've wondered for 6 years. What was so terrible she'd rather her son be blind than witness it?" Grace asked quietly, "Mr. Harrison, where is Ethan's mother now?" William's face paled. "Victoria died 3 years ago. Car accident." "Or," Grace said with 5-year-old wisdom, "was she running away from something?" They drove back in heavy silence. When they arrived, William headed for the attic. "Mrs. Thompson, put the children to bed. I need to find something." But Grace shook her head. "Mr. Harrison, I think I know what we're looking for." William looked at this remarkable child who'd unraveled more in weeks than experts had in years. "All right, Grace, let's search together." The attic was a museum of Harrison family history. Grace moved systematically through boxes until she found a locked trunk in the corner. "What's in this?" "I don't know. Victoria kept the key, but after she died." William retrieved her personal effects from the garage. The trunk opened with a rusty creak. Inside were letters, journals, and an envelope marked, "Do not open." William tore it open. Crime scene photographs, police reports, newspaper clippings, all dated 7 years ago, 1 year before Ethan's birth. "Oh my God," William whispered, color draining from his face. Grace looked at the headlines. "Wealthy Connecticut woman walks free after self-defense claim. Victoria Morrison cleared in intruder death." "Mr. Harrison, who was Victoria before she married you?" "Victoria Morrison. We met at a charity gala. This house was her family's estate." Grace picked up a crime scene photo. "Where did this happen?" William's hand shook, reading the police report. "The nursery. What's now Ethan's nursery." Everything clicked. Victoria had killed someone in self-defense in the room where a year later she'd give birth. She'd been cleared legally, but the trauma, the memory. She couldn't let him see it, Grace whispered. The room remembered. She remembered. She was so afraid Ethan would somehow sense what happened there. "Aye, so she made him blind," William finished, tears streaming. "She loved him so much, she blinded him to protect him from her trauma." Grace found another item, an evidence bag with dirt inside. "What's this?" William read the label. "Sample from burial site. Removed concrete beneath nursery floorboards." His voice stopped. The bag fell. "The intruder Victoria killed," William said hollowly. "They never found all the evidence. Suggestions the body was moved, something buried, but the case closed." "Buried where?" William looked at Grace. "Under the nursery floor. And later, after renovations, under the garden, exactly where you and Ethan were playing in the mud." Grace went white. "When we were digging, when Ethan's hands went deep, he touched something, something that made his sensing stronger." "We have to dig," William said. "No," Grace said firmly. "We have to help Ethan. If his blindness was caused by Victoria's fear, maybe we can undo it by showing him it's safe now." William stared at this 5-year-old offering the solution no expert had found. But first, they needed to know exactly what Victoria had buried, and why her dying words had been, "The garden knows." William stood in the garden at dawn with a shovel, Detective Marcus Reeves beside him, with ground-penetrating radar. "You're sure about this?" Reeves asked. "Some truths can't be reburied. My son's been in darkness 6 years because of a secret in this ground. We're facing it." The scan took 2 hours. When they returned, their faces were grim. "There's something there," Reeves confirmed. 4 feet down, metal container. Grace came outside. "Before you dig, Ethan told me something. When his hands went deep in the mud, he felt something. Not with fingers, with his mind, like a scream frozen in the earth." "That's not possible," Reeves said. "Neither is a mother's fear making her infant blind," William interrupted. "Yet that happened. My son touched something here that changed him." But the excavation began at noon. Grace insisted Ethan be present. "He needs to be here. This is his truth." At 3 feet, they found it. A metal strongbox, corroded, buried beneath decades. Inside, a wallet belonging to Marcus Holloway, a bloody shirt, and a letter in Victoria's handwriting. Reeves read aloud, "If anyone finds this, the truth must be known. Marcus Holloway didn't break in to rob me. He was my father's business partner, came to retrieve evidence of my father's crimes. I killed him to protect my family's reputation. Police believed my self-defense story, but it was murder. I buried the evidence here, thinking no one would know. But the house knows, the earth knows. When I gave birth to Ethan in that room, I was consumed by guilt and fear. I couldn't bear for him to see the truth in my eyes, in this poisoned ground. So I wished him blind. God forgive me. I prayed my son would never see what I'd done. Somehow my prayer was answered. I'm leaving. I can't stay anymore. Every day I see Ethan's empty eyes. I know it's my fault. The garden holds my sin, and my son pays the price." The letter was dated 3 days before Victoria's fatal accident. William collapsed, understanding flooding through him. His wife hadn't died randomly. She'd driven away and maybe hadn't tried to survive. Grace knelt beside Ethan, who stood rigid. "Can you feel it? Can you sense what's there?" "Yes," Ethan said clearly. "It's been calling since we played. It wanted to be found. It wanted truth out." "What else do you sense?" "My mother. Her fear, her sadness, her love." He turned toward William. "Dad, is Mom why I can't see?" William gathered him close, both crying. "Yes, she tried to protect you from her pain, but she went about it wrong. Can you fix it? Can I see now that the secret's out?" Grace took his face in her hands. "Your brain turned off your vision to protect you. Maybe now that there's nothing to be protected from, it'll let you see again." It was fragile hope, but more than they'd had in 6 years. That night, the truth stood exposed. A secret that poisoned a family, stole a child's sight, drove a woman to death. All unearthed by 2 children asking questions no one else had thought to ask. Could the damage be undone? Dr. Chen flew in from Johns Hopkins with specialists in trauma-induced conditions. They set up in the library, turning it into an examination room. "This is unprecedented," Dr. Chen said, reviewing Victoria's letter. "Psychogenic blindness tied to maternal trauma at birth transferred to an infant." "The mechanism, can you fix it?" Grace interrupted. Dr. Chen looked at this child who cut through to the heart of things. "Grace, the brain is incredibly plastic in childhood. If Ethan's blindness is psychological, and evidence suggests it is, then yes, theoretically it can be reversed, but it's not like flipping a switch." "Then what?" "Teaching him it's safe to see again. His brain built a wall. We need to show the wall isn't necessary." Over the next week, they tried everything: exposure therapy, trauma counseling, neurological reprogramming. Ethan was patient, brave, but his eyes remained unseeing. On the 8th day, Grace found Ethan in the garden where everything began. She sat beside him in the dirt. "It's not working," Ethan said quietly. "Not yet. But we'll figure it out. Maybe my brain's forgotten how to be anything but dark." Grace was quiet. Then, "Ethan, when you touch the mud, what do you feel?" "Echoes. Emotions in the earth. My mother's fear, mostly." "Just fear." Ethan paused, hands in dirt. "No!" "Something else underneath. Something warmer." "What?" "It feels like love. My mother's deep love. Not the scared love that made me blind. The real love that wanted me to have a beautiful life." Grace grabbed his hands. "That's it. That's what you need. Not the fear your mother gave you, but the love underneath. She didn't want you in darkness. She made a mistake, and you can fix it." "How?" "By choosing to see. Your brain protected you when you couldn't choose. But you're 6 now. You're brave. You can tell your brain it's okay. You can choose to see." Dr. Chen, observing from the house, came running. "Say that again, Grace. He needs to choose to see. Agency, conscious choice." His brain shut down vision because baby Ethan had no control, but 6-year-old Ethan does. He turned to Ethan. "Close your eyes physically." Ethan obeyed. "Think about your mother. Not the scared mother. The mother who held you, sang to you, loved you. Okay. Imagine that love giving you permission. Permission to see, to open your eyes to the world, to be safe." Ethan sat still. Grace held his hand. William stood at the door, barely breathing. Sarah clutched the doorframe. "When you're ready, only when you feel safe, open your eyes and choose to see." The garden went silent. Even birds held their breath. Ethan sat for an eternity. Tears rolled down his closed eyes. His body shook with 6 years of protection, walls, darkness being asked to become light. Then, slowly, Ethan Harrison opened his eyes. At first, nothing changed. But then Grace squeezed his hand. "I'm here, Ethan. Right beside you. It's safe. You can see me." Ethan turned toward her voice and froze. His eyes weren't empty anymore. They weren't focused or clear, but they were registering, processing, attempting. "Grace?" Ethan whispered. "Grace, I see. Light." Dr. Chen nearly collapsed. William sobbed. Sarah cried. Grace just smiled, tears streaming. "That's me. I'm the light. Keep looking, Ethan. Keep choosing to see." As the sun set over the Harrison estate, over the garden that held secrets and love and truth, Ethan Harrison began, slowly, miraculously, to see. Not clearly, not perfectly. Blurry, undefined, more impression than image. Dr. Chen said it would take weeks for his visual processing to develop. His brain had to relearn everything, but he was seeing. Choosing to see. Grace hugged him, and for the first time, Ethan saw the outline of his best friend's face. He couldn't make out details, but he saw the shape, the light, the presence of her. "You're beautiful," he said, and Grace laughed through tears. That night, Ethan saw his father's face for the first time. Just shapes and shadows, but enough. William held his son and wept. "Thank you," William whispered to Grace. "Thank you for giving me my son back." Grace shook her head. Ethan gave himself back. He chose to see. That was all him. Whatever darkness had held Ethan captive finally released him, not through medicine or expertise, but because a 6-year-old boy found courage to choose light over protective darkness. The secret was out. The truth known. The garden had given up its horror and granted healing. Over 3 weeks, Ethan's vision crystallized. Like a photograph developing, first shapes, then gradually more definition, clarity, reality. Dr. Chen visited daily, calling the progress miraculous. His brain is rewiring in real time. Visual cortex development compressed and accelerated. Extraordinary. But it wasn't easy. Headaches. Sometimes visual information overwhelmed him, and he'd retreat to familiar darkness. He'd learned to navigate through sound and touch. Vision was a new skill learned from scratch. Grace was there for all of it. She helped identify colors, pointing at grass saying green, sky saying blue, her skin saying brown. She showed him his reflection, and Ethan cried, seeing his own face. "Is this really me? That's really you. And you're handsome." Ethan looked at William, seeing him clearly now. "You look like Grandma's pictures." "I suppose I do." "And you look like your mother. You have her eyes." It was the first mention of Victoria without pain in weeks. The truth had been difficult for everyone. Detective Reeves officially closed the Marcus Holloway case. Media got wind of the story, but lawyers kept it quiet. What couldn't be kept quiet was Ethan's miraculous recovery. Doctors wanted to study him, but William refused. Let him be a child. Let him see the world without being a spectacle. Grace started kindergarten at Ethan's school. They explored together, discovering they both loved butterflies, hated Brussels sprouts, could spend hours building with blocks. One afternoon, playing in the garden, the same garden with dark secrets, Grace pushed Ethan on the new swing. William had wanted to tear it up, but Dr. Chen convinced him otherwise. That garden is where Ethan healed. Destroying it says places touched by trauma must be eliminated. Better to transform it, make it a place of life instead of death. They'd planted new flowers, rebuilt the fountain, added swings and a slide. The garden where Victoria buried sin became where 2 children played and laughed. "Grace, can I ask something?" Ethan said. "Always. Why did you help me? Why did you care?" Grace stopped the swing and faced him. In afternoon light, Ethan saw her clearly. Brown skin, braided hair, gentle smile, kind eyes. "Because you were lonely. Because everybody deserves to see the world. And because sometimes people who have everything still have nothing, and people who have nothing still have everything. My mama taught me that. What do I have? Everything. Your sight, your dad who loves you, this home and me, your best friend forever. Forever. forever and ever. That evening, William called Sarah and Grace to his office. "Mrs. Thompson, these past months, Grace has given Ethan more than sight. She's given him friendship, hope, courage, healing. Sir, your daughter is extraordinary. I want to set up an education trust for Grace, college, graduate school, whatever she wants. It's the least I can do." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "That's too generous. It's not generous enough. Grace saved my son. I can make sure she never wants for anything." Grace looked between them. "Does this mean Ethan and I can keep being friends?" William knelt to her level. "Grace, you and Ethan will always be friends, I promise. Whatever happens, you'll always have each other." "Good. Because he still needs me. His eyes work now, but he's still learning. And seeing isn't just about eyes, it's about understanding what you're looking at." William laughed genuinely for the first time in years. "Yes, Grace, you're very good at that." That night, Ethan looked out his window at stars, real, visible points of light he could finally see. He thought about his mother, the fear that bound him, the love that freed him. "I forgive you, Mom," he whispered. "I understand. You were trying to protect me. You didn't know I'd be strong enough to face the truth." Downstairs, Grace helped Sarah clean. "Mama, do you think Ethan's mom is in heaven?" "Why do you ask, baby?" "Because I want her to know Ethan's okay. I want her to know he can see now, and he's happy." Sarah gathered her remarkable daughter close. "I think she knows, Grace. Wherever she is, Victoria Harrison knows her son is finally free." Outside, stars shone over the estate. The garden slept peacefully, secrets released, soil nourishing flowers instead of hiding sin. The house stood calm, no longer haunted but filled with healing. And in 2 bedrooms, one large, one modest, 2 children slept peacefully, connected by a bond transcending blindness, secrets, and troubled adult legacies. The truth was found, darkness defeated. 2 children's futures, once shadowed by things they couldn't control, now stretched bright and infinite. Some friendships don't just change lives, they rewrite destinies. Grace Thompson and Ethan Harrison would prove that the most powerful force isn't wealth or status. It's the courage to see truth, the compassion to help others see it, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the greatest sight comes from the heart, not the eyes. 6 months later, the Harrison mansion looked different. Not structurally. The white columns still gleamed, the garden still bloomed, but it felt different. It felt like a home. It was Ethan's 7th birthday, and the backyard was filled with children from school, colorful balloons tied to the fence, tables laden with cake and presents. Sarah had outdone herself with the catering, and William stood on the patio watching his son, really watching him, run and laugh and play like any other child. Except Ethan wasn't like any other child, and everyone there knew it. Dr. Chen had flown in from Johns Hopkins specifically for this celebration. He stood beside William, both men watching Ethan chase Grace through the garden with a joy that seemed impossible just months ago. "His visual acuity is now at 95%, Dr. Chen said quietly. "In medical terms, it's a complete recovery. But you and I both know it's more than that. He sees things other people don't," William said. "Not just with his eyes. The 6 years he spent developing alternative sensory perception didn't disappear when his vision returned," Dr. Chen explained. "He still has that extraordinary spatial awareness, that ability to sense emotional resonance. He just has vision added to it now. In some ways, Ethan sees more clearly than anyone else in the world." William's eyes misted. Because Grace taught him to see with his heart before his eyes ever worked. Exactly. Across the garden, Grace and Ethan collapsed under the oak tree, breathless from running. Ethan looked up at the branches above them, really looked, taking in every leaf, every pattern of light and shadow. "Grace," he said softly. "Yeah, I never thanked you properly." For everything. Grace rolled onto her side to face him. At nearly 6 years old now, she'd grown taller, her face losing some of its baby roundness. But her eyes still held that same wisdom, that same fierce compassion. "You don't have to thank me, Ethan." "Yes, I do. You didn't give up on me when everyone else had. You saw me, really saw me, even when I couldn't see myself." Grace smiled. "That's what friends do. We see each other, especially when it's hard." "Is that why you weren't afraid?" "When everyone was talking about disturbing secrets and police investigations and all that grown-up stuff. I wasn't looking for secrets," Grace said simply. "I was looking for you, the real you, trapped behind the darkness. Once I knew you were in there, I just had to find a way to let you out." Ethan reached over and took her hand, something he did often now, though not out of necessity for guidance. Now it was just friendship, just connection, just love. "You saved my life, Grace." "No," Grace corrected gently. "I helped you save your own life. There's a difference. I couldn't make you choose to see, only you could do that." From the patio, Sarah watched her daughter with pride that threatened to burst her chest. William came over, standing beside her. "Mrs. Thompson, Sarah, I've been thinking," William said. "Grace will start first grade soon. I'd like to pay for her to attend Hillcrest Academy with Ethan." Sarah turned to him, tears already forming. "Mr. Harrison, you've already done so much." "Please," William interrupted gently. "Those 2 children changed my life. They solved a mystery that destroyed my wife and blinded my son. They brought truth to light when everyone else was content to leave it buried. The least I can do is ensure they grow up together, that Grace has every opportunity, every advantage." "She doesn't need advantages," Sarah said softly. "She just needs to stay herself." "I know. And I promise you I'll never try to change who she is, but I can give her opportunities to become even more of who she's meant to be." Sarah nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by gratitude and hope, and the knowledge that her daughter's future was now secured not by charity, but by genuine love and respect. The birthday party continued into the evening. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and purples that Ethan could finally see, the children gathered around the garden fountain. Someone suggested stories, and Grace, always the natural storyteller, began telling the tale of a brave prince who lived in darkness. "But he wasn't really blind," Grace said, her voice carrying across the garden. "He was just learning to see in a different way. And when he finally opened his eyes, he realized the darkness had taught him something important." "What?" one of the children asked. "That seeing isn't just about eyes," Grace said, looking directly at Ethan. "It's about understanding. It's about truth. It's about being brave enough to look at hard things and not turn away." Ethan smiled at her, and in that smile was everything: gratitude, friendship, understanding, and a bond that would last their entire lives. Later, after the guests had left and the sun had fully set, Ethan and Grace sat together on the patio steps. William and Sarah were cleaning up inside, giving the children a moment alone under the stars. "Grace," Ethan said, "do you think my mom would be proud of me for choosing to see?" Grace thought carefully before answering. "I think your mom would be relieved. I think she carried guilt so heavy it broke her, but I also think wherever she is now, she sees you happy and free, and that gives her peace." "How do you know?" "Because love doesn't end, not even when people do. Your mom loved you enough to try to protect you even if she did it wrong. That love is still here. It's in this house, in that garden, in you, and now it's not trapped by secrets anymore. It's free, just like you." Ethan looked up at the stars, the same stars he'd spent 6 years never seeing, never knowing, never imagining. Now they were his favorite thing in the world. "Do you think we'll always be friends?" "Forever and ever," Grace said firmly. "You and me, we've seen things together that most people never see. We've faced darkness and found light. Friends like that don't just drift apart." Promise? I promise. Cross my heart. Grace made the gesture over her chest. Besides, you still need me. Who else is going to keep you humble when you're showing off about seeing things other people can't? Ethan laughed, that genuine, joyful laugh that had become common over the past months. Fair point. Inside, William and Sarah stood at the window, watching the two children silhouetted against the night sky. Do you think they understand? William asked. Do they understand how extraordinary they are? No, Sarah said with a smile. And that's what makes them so special. They don't see themselves as heroes. They just see each other as friends. William nodded, then said quietly, I'm going to establish a foundation in Victoria's name for children with unexplained medical conditions, particularly those related to trauma. I want other families to have hope, to have the kind of help Grace gave us. That's beautiful, Sarah said. Victoria would like that. A legacy of healing instead of secrets. And I want Grace involved as she grows up. Her insights, her perspective, they're invaluable. She'll like that. She's always wanted to help people. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the children, thinking about how a simple act of kindness, a cook allowing her daughter to play with a lonely boy, had unraveled a mystery, healed a family, and changed multiple futures. Outside, Grace stood up, pulling Ethan with her. Come on, one more thing before bed. She led him to the garden, to the spot where they'd first played in the mud, where everything had changed. The flowers planted there were blooming now, beautiful white roses that glowed in the moonlight. These are hope flowers, Grace said. That's what my mama calls them. They grow in places where bad things happened, and they transform the space into something beautiful. Ethan knelt down, touching the soft petals. With his eyes, he saw their delicate beauty. With his heightened senses, he felt their vitality, their life, their triumph over the darkness that had once poisoned this soil. Grace, he whispered, I can see them, really see them, not just with my eyes, but with everything I am. They're the most beautiful things I've ever seen. That's because you're seeing with your whole heart now, Grace said. That's the gift, not just that you can see, but that you understand what you're seeing. Ethan stood up and looked at his best friend, her face clear in the moonlight, her smile genuine, her presence the most constant, beautiful thing in his life. Thank you, Grace, for everything, for being my friend when I was alone, for believing I could see when everyone else had given up, for helping me find the truth, even when it was scary. Grace hugged him tight. You're welcome. And thank you for being brave enough to choose the light. That wasn't easy, and you did it anyway. As they walked back to the house, hand in hand, both children understood something profound without having words for it yet. They had witnessed the power of truth, the strength of compassion, and the miracle that happens when one person refuses to give up on another. The garden behind them stood peaceful, its secrets finally released, its soil nurturing life instead of hiding death. The house above them glowed warm with light and love and promise. And two children, once separated by wealth and circumstance, now walked together toward a future neither could have imagined just months before. Ethan Harrison had lived in darkness for 6 years, trapped by his mother's fear and love. But Grace Thompson had seen past the darkness, past the unseeing eyes, past the impossible medical mystery, straight to the truth, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to see, even when seeing is terrifying. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is help someone else find the courage to look. The secret was out. The truth was known. The darkness was defeated. And two children, one who'd been blind and one who'd never stopped seeing, walked together into the light that would guide them for the rest of their lives. The story of Ethan and Grace would be told for years to come, not just as a medical miracle or a mystery solved, but as a testament to the extraordinary power of friendship, the necessity of truth, and the beautiful reality that sometimes the smallest hands can move the biggest mountains. All you need is the courage to ask the questions everyone else is afraid to ask. All you need is the compassion to see what everyone else has missed. All you need is the love to hold someone's hand in their darkness until they're ready to step into the light. Grace Thompson did all three, and in doing so, she didn't just help a blind boy see. She showed the whole world what real vision looks like.